Okay, let me kind of start again. So, welcome to the last class of this session. And today we have two great speakers, Reverend Kuwahara of the Berkeley Buddhist Temple and Joe Gotchy from Seattle. So, um, so Joe, can you begin by introducing yourself?
Would love to. Thank you very much. My father's family came from French-speaking Canada. When they immigrated to the United States in the mid-1800s, they changed the name from Gothier to Gotchy, and now no one can pronounce it correctly. My mother's parents immigrated to the United States from Sweden in 1922. At Ellis Island, their last name was changed from Hellman to Hallman. My maternal grandparents had 5 children. 4 died at birth or shortly thereafter. My mother, who was the only survivor, passed away in February, just a few weeks shy of her 96th birthday. So my birth only underscores what is written in the three treasures. Hard is it to receive a human form? Difficult is it to hear the Buddha Dharma? While I'm an old man, I'm a young Buddhist. It took me 64 years before I embraced Jodo Shinshu Buddhism. It shouldn't have taken that long, but it did. I grew up in Fife, Washington in the 1950s and 60s. Fife was a very diverse community at that time with members from the Puyallup tribe of Indians, Swiss, Italians, Eastern Europeans, Japanese Americans, and families like mine. In the first grade, I was invited to dinner at Doug Tanabe's home. It was the first time I'd ever been invited to anybody's home for dinner. We ate white rice for the first time, and I got to learn how to use chopsticks. In the sixth grade, I started working for Kei and Kiyo Kawaguchi. They grew radishes and green onions. I worked for them for 3 years. In the ninth grade, I started working for Yosh and Fumi Tanabe, Doug's uncle and aunt. Their daughter, Cheryl, was also a classmate of mine. They grew lettuce and romaine. I admired the way these families lived their lives. And years later, I would learn that both Doug's father and Cheryl's father both served as presidents of the Tacoma Buddhist Temple. In 1974, Margaret Matsuda and I were hired as first-year teachers at the same high school. Several weeks later, I overheard some students, and they were talking about this wonderful German teacher they had. So after school, I dropped into Margaret's classroom and I told her what I'd heard. And 2 years later, we were married in Seattle. Margaret's parents met, married, and had their first of 3 children while incarcerated at Minidoka. Like my Fife friends, they too were Jodo Shinshu Buddhists. The first time I had dinner with my future mother-in-law, she was surprised that I was adept at using chopsticks, thanks to Doug and his family. During the years we were raising our children and working, Margaret and I didn't seem to have time for anything else. Our Sundays were always filled grading papers, preparing lessons for the next week, and attending to our own 2 children. With that said, we would always attend annual events at the local temples, and every time we saw Reverend Castro, we told him there would come a day when we would start attending services. Well, in 2014, my father passed in May and Margaret's mother in November. And ironically, we attended our first Sunday service on December the 7th of 2014. And shortly after that, we took our seats, an older woman, Peggy, who was sitting behind us, tapped Margaret on the shoulder. And she asked, "Who are you?" And Margaret said, "Oh, I'm Margaret Gotchy. My parents were Kiyoshi and Esther Matsuda." And the woman said, "I knew your parents." And all of a sudden, she began introducing us to everybody who was sitting around us. And we felt the Sangha's embrace, and we have been there ever since. I'm an old man, but still a young Buddhist.
Well, the wonderful self-introduction. Uh, Thank you. Learned a lot about you, more than I knew before. So, um, okay, so let's start the kind of the chat. The first question that I wish to impose on you is, by the way, today's session is on the Pure Land, and it's the represents the seventh phase, the last phase of our parable, where the sailor reaches the island, and that represents the Pure Land. But as you know, he does not stay there, but he gets on a smaller boat and goes out to the sea because to represent the phase of returning on behalf of others so that he can be of help to others. So, uh, so with that, Joe, how do you understand, the Pure Land, which is often depicted in a fairy tale-like description, example, jewel trees and pavilions, and how that kind of a description in the sutras, how do you understand or appreciate that?
Well, my understanding of fairy tale-like descriptions comes from Reverend Kusunoki. He was transferred to Seattle in April of 2017, and during the first week of 2018, he led 5 consecutive daily sessions where we chanted the entire 3 Pure Land Sutras together. I attended every session. Then I began attending his Wednesday morning services where we would chant a section of the 3 Pure Land Sutras, take turns reading it aloud in English, and then we discuss it for 45 minutes to an hour. And shortly after the pandemic started, we continued that routine on Zoom. So I owe my appreciation and understanding the sutras to those sessions. The fairy tale-like descriptions of the Pure Land serve as a skillful means to convey profound spiritual teachings in a way that resonate with the human imagination. For me, the unimaginable descriptions provide a precious opportunity to think about a perfect world, a blissful and enlightened world, perhaps even a utopian world that I couldn't have imagined had I not read or discussed the sutras in English. They use vivid imagery, such as bejeweled trees and pavilions, lapis lazuli light, golden rivers to symbolize the ideal environment of the Pure Land, where practicers are freed from suffering and distraction and can fully devote themselves to the path of enlightenment. I don't take these descriptions literally, but I embrace them as symbolic representations of the blissful state of liberation that one can attain through the practice of Pure Land Buddhism. They inspire faith in me. And they provide me with a means of aspiring to get to the Pure Land. And they help me cultivate the necessary conditions for hopefully rebirth in the Pure Land at some point.
Okay. So are you through with?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So you said you don't take it literally, but symbolically. And so in personally speaking, I mean, on a personal level, when you say symbolically, what does that mean? I mean, well, I think you said it inspires faith in me.
Yes.
So can you say a little bit more about that?
When it comes to the idea of the Pure Land, as I've read about it in the larger sutra, it is to me unimaginable that it could be so fabulous, so unbelievable. Now, it may be all of that, but at least for me living in this world today, I'm just not sure whether it's going to be like that or whether it's symbolic of something else. So I'll leave it to Reverend Kuwahara to straighten me out on that one.
Yeah. Okay, well, so what at least doctrinally, we know that according to Shinran, that birth in the Pure Land means that you become the Buddha, a Buddha, which is the ultimate goal of all Buddhists, and where you overcome, pain and suffering, and you finally realize your ultimate goal of wisdom and compassion. And so that I think that doctrinally that's important. And so yeah, I think that many of us, and including myself, I don't perceive Pure Land to be exactly the way it's depicted. in a fairy tale kind of description, but they symbolize for me that that my spiritual goals, my aims will be fully um, uh, consummated, and that then I will be able to and also be freed in a sense. Well, anyway, okay. So let's go to the second question. Some other Buddhist schools talk of this world as a pure land. What do you think of that kind of thought? Um,
Well, I'm interested in the evolution, the transmission of Pure Land Buddhism from China to Japan, from Japan to Hawaii, and the continental Americas. In his book, Chinese Pure Land Buddhism, Charles Jones states that many of the practices, and I quote here, entail thinking of the Pure Land as a place somewhere over there, a pure realm far to the west that can be contrasted with this impure Saha realm where we live. But Jones also says, and I quote again, there's another way of regarding the Pure Land, and that is to see it as coexisting with the present world. In this view, he said, the Saha realm is inherently pure. The perception that it is impure and not conducive to practice and attainment arises only because the impure minds of unawakened beings project impurity on it. As the Contemplation Sutra famously says, this mind produces the Buddha. The mind is the Buddha, including that the purification of the mind by visualization makes one of us the Buddha. While understanding and explaining all that means that's way beyond my pay grade. I'll leave that to somebody else. But I really do love the tension between these two possibilities, that it may be somewhere else, but it may also be right here. In this Pure Land, a separate realm accessible through practice and devotion by taking refuge in Amida Buddha and saying the Nembutsu, or let me rephrase that. Is the Pure Land a separate realm, or is it a metaphor for realizing enlightenment in this very world? In this context, our present reality can be seen as inherently pure, with the potential for awakening present in every moment and every aspect of our existence. Thus, rather than seeking a distinct paradise, practitioners like me can focus on uncovering the inherent purity and boundless potential living within our everyday lives through mindfulness and compassion and wisdom. My Jodo Shinshu mother-in-law died of Alzheimer's in 2014. As the disease grasped her, stole her memory, and eventually her ability to communicate verbally, there was never any sign of distress or anger. She lived her life without uttering a single sharp or hurtful word right to the end. Yes, she may have suffered, but she may also have been living in her own Pure Land right here in this world. My mother was baptized as a young child, but lived her adult life without a formal spiritual tradition. While she didn't have Alzheimer's, she suffered from profound short-term memory loss. 3 months before she passed, knowing that she had been baptized, I asked her if she believed in heaven. She looked me in the eye, smiled, and said, Joe, I can't imagine living a life any better than the one I've lived right here. She too might have been living in her own Pure Land in this world, and at least that thought puts a smile on my face. For me, I'm comfortable thinking that Amida's Pure Land might be somewhere in the 10 quarters of the universe, and that I might be living, or that I might be living in the Pure Land right here, right now. Or maybe the Pure Land resides within me. Maybe it's all three.
Okay. Well, thank you for there's quite a bit of thoughts involved there. I really liked your mother's comments. And by the way, once again, our condolences to, to your mother's passing. But as you said, she lived a really full life, and so I think what she said about her life, uh, it seems to me that for her, her life, this life was like a pure land, and so when you heard that from her, how did you feel?
Oh, it made me feel wonderful because my mother and father were not rich people. They did not live an extravagant life. They lived a very basic life in their own way, very ethical, very moral. They took care of their family, they took care of their friends and their neighbors. And to hear her say that she knew she was going to die, and yet she didn't have any regrets. There wasn't anything else that she could have asked for in this life. That made me feel really great.
Okay. Yeah. So earlier you said the three different forms of Pure Land. The Pure Land is my awakened mind,
Yes.
or when I'm awakened, this world, the Saha world seems to be like the Pure Land. And then the third one is that Pure Land is beyond this particular world. And so in Buddhism, in Mahayana Buddhism, we have all three forms of Pure Land. And uh, I think, for example, the Zen tradition talks about Pure Land as the enlightened mind. When the mind is enlightened, when I'm enlightened, that's the Pure Land. Uh, and there are other sutras that talk about in that way. But Shinran also acknowledges that this world is samsara, and that, if you look at, in my opinion, like what's going on in Ukraine and now in Gaza, and we just heard about Princess Catherine, um, contracting cancer. That is not uh, hunky dory. The world is not hunky dory. And I think we always have that tension, you know, this world of samsara, of filled with difficulties and suffering. Yet I think basically for me that with Buddhism, despite the fact that this is samsara, we come to some awakening and appreciation through which you see that this life is pretty good, like, Joe's mother. And 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 so then one can say it's like the Pure Land. But probably with Shinran, he probably wouldn't go that far. He also acknowledges that there's greater dimensions beyond this world, and that is a realm of oneness, and in which we find the Pure Land. And in that, one also, once you come in contact or appreciate that or awaken to it, then you also continue to do what you can to make this world a better place. And that's the phase of returning from the world, from Pure Land to samsara. Okay, so I wish we had more time, but we have to go on. So, Joe, how does the assurance, I'm emphasizing the assurance of our birth in the Pure Land affect us in this life?
For me, assurance kind of it instills a deep trust in the power of Amida Buddha's compassion. This assurance impacts my approach to life. It fosters clarity, compassion in my own life, and gratitude as well. I think it reminds me that my inherent foolishness and the boundless compassion that welcomes beings like me into the Pure Land um, is a very good thing. It gives me relief from this samsara world. The assurance also enables me to approach my life with greater ease. Reverend, you've told us about that life is a bumpy road, and this assurance that I'm going to reach the Pure Land. For me, um, that that helps me accept the joys of life and the sorrows of life. And we all experience that. And I think the assurance makes it easy for me to accept the day-to-day, the bumpy road that we are on.
Mm.
It also helps me accept the fact that I am a foolish being. I will always be a foolish being. And yet Amida welcomes foolish beings like me into the Pure Land.
Mm.
Assurance of birth in the Pure Land has replaced my anxiety and fear of death most of the time. I know you've talked about your fear of death as a young person. My maternal grandfather died when I was 4. It was the first time I ever saw my mother cry. And in her own way, my paternal grandmother tried to put me at ease about death by telling me that death was like just going to sleep. Well, that was the worst thing you could have ever told a young child. And for many, many years, that kept me up at night. And
Oh.
I don't experience anything like that today. And a lot of it is because I think I have had that one thought moment. I have an entrusting heart now, and I am assured that I'm going to go to the Pure Land.
Okay, well said. Um, let's again. I wish we could have more time, but let's go to the fourth one. Is this is a kind of a doctrine that is unusual in the world of uh, different views on say the heaven, because once traditionally in the monotheistic religions, you go to the heaven, and there's no talk of coming back. But in our tradition, there is an aspect of returning. So, what does it mean to you, Joe, when Shinran says, there's a phase of returning from the Pure Land?
Maybe it's the ultimate form of being an engaged Buddhist, to die, to go to the Pure Land, to know that you may come back then as a bodhisattva to help guide others, to help guide others to the Pure Land, but also to help guide them through the day-to-day existence that we have in this world. I love Obon. I loved it before I embraced and called myself a Buddhist. I enjoyed going to the summer festivals way back when, because I enjoyed watching the dancing and eating and being with other people.
Mm.
But today, the part of Obon that I love the most are the cemetery services. I love to go to Washelli, where my in-laws and Margaret's mother and father and grandparents, all 4 grandparents, our son-in-law, and others are buried. And I love being there with Reverend Kusunoki or Reverend Castro and being part of a service that expressly calls upon us to think about them coming back in a physical form, maybe not. But when I'm at Washelli, I feel as close to Margaret's parents as I've ever felt. And perhaps now I appreciate them more. I'm more grateful
Mm.
for the path they set in place for people like me.
Mm. Well said. Thank you. Well said with your heart. And okay. So the last question is kind of like an overall catch-off question. What does it mean for you to be born in the Pure Land?
Well, as a Jodo Shinshu Buddhist, I aspire to become a Buddha. And that aspiration reminds me how I should live my life, my daily life. Being born in the Pure Land will be the realization of the ultimate goal of liberation from suffering and delusion. I've suffered in life like everybody else on the screen in front of me. As an old man and a young Buddhist, I accept the fact that I cannot get there on my own. Pushing aside self-power, accepting other power, experiencing the one thought moment, finding within me an entrusting heart, and saying the Nembutsu in gratitude for all that Amida Buddha and Shakyamuni Buddha have done for sentient beings, including myself, makes me feel like Reverend Tanaka's metaphorical sailor who falls overboard, struggles and fears that he will drown until he listens to the Dharma takes refuge, relaxes, realizes that he can float, makes his way to the island, and then ultimately gets aboard another small boat and makes his way back to those that he may have left behind. As I said earlier, my journey to Jodo Shinshu Buddhism has taken much longer than it should have, but I'm very grateful to have embraced Buddhism when I did. It's been a journey that's transformed my perspective of birth and life and death, instilling a sense of peace and acceptance. And with that said, I'm still a foolish being. Thank you.
Well, okay. So so I think you've spoken very well of your about your thoughts and commitment to the teaching. You keep saying I'm an old man and young Buddhist, but you sound to me more like a young man and an old Buddhist.
Oh, I'm definitely an older man. I'll be 73 next month. Um, and I've only really considered myself a Buddhist for maybe the last 9 years.
Yeah.
It wasn't until early in the pandemic that I found an entrusting heart. At that time, my wife and I undertook the project of taking the Gabunsho, the Seattle Buddhist Temple's translation of the Gabunsho that was started in 1948 and finished in 1976, had never been digitized, had never been keystroked. And so I keystroked every word of Renyo's complete Gabunsho.
Mhm.
And in doing so, we went back and edited that several times. And it gave me an opportunity to think about other power
Mm.
and 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 self-power and what it meant to have an entrusting heart. Um,
Okay, well, Gobunsho, by the way, is Renyo's letters that he wrote, and so I know that Seattle had um, a, a well-known, or well, actually, she's not well-known. I think Reverend Pratt, uh, who is not Japanese, who became a minister. And I've known about her when I was young, and I was impressed that here we had a, Euro-American person who had become, and a woman at that, and who was very, scholarly, learned. And there was something about her in the Wheel of Dharma recently. So I encourage you to read more about her. She's an impressive figure. And you can find the Wheel of Dharma online. Just go to BCA website, and you have so anyway, um, uh, thank you, Joe. And we have come to the end of the interview kind of session. So why don't we open it up to questions and comments? So please don't hold back. And okay,
We have one question in the chat from Junko.
yeah.
She's asking, why did your mother have no regrets in life? I think I will have many regrets in life when I pass away.
Wow, that's a great question. I don't think my mother expected much of life. Um, Being the only child of five to survive, parents who uh, probably never imagined that their daughter would would live the life she did. She married um, my father after they met in high school. She was a stay-at-home mother. She loved being a stay-at-home mother. She took care of our family. Um, and that always seemed to be enough for her. She never wanted material things. Was always just so happy to be at home and to take care of the daily chores of life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it goes to, the basic doctrine of Buddhism. The source of suffering is gas. greed, aversion, and S, stupidity. But gas, the G part is a greed, and in a way that if you seek too much, if you are greedy, then you'll be more dissatisfied. But if you're not greedy and everything that is presented to you is more than what you sought, then one would be basically happy and grateful. I think that's one of the fundamental teachings of Buddhism and other religions is that want less and you'll be happier. And well, look at monks and nuns. I mean, their lives are one of very little wants, and that's why they're able to really live Buddhism to its fullest. Unfortunately, for someone like myself and many of you, we're not, we can't live that kind of way. I mean, we want to live normal life, but that's when Shinshu comes in, Shin Buddhism comes in. Okay, so thank you. Any comments on this and others? Okay. Igor, any more questions?
Yes. Okay. We have a question from John Barnes. I'm not sure if it's for Joe. Maybe he can give us his take. But the question is, Reverend Tanaka spoke to this briefly, but I still have a question. We wrestle with defining Amida and Pure Land in our modern times. Was the same interpretation and debate present during Shinran's life, or was his understanding more clear and plainly stated?
Uh, Joe, okay. Well, I mean, Joe, so you don't want to take it up?
I'll follow you.
Oh,
That's
well, you don't,
follow your lead.
well, I think, um, basically, the way, Pure Land and Amida are presented, it made more sense to people back then because it fit in with the worldview of that time. But uh, but basically, Amida and Pure Land are symbols. It was actually a symbol for Shinran too, because he didn't see the Pure Land exactly that way. He understood that it's expression of the oneness. And we talked about this in the course last year in pretty much in depth. So if you are still, you know, have questions, please go back to the last year's course. And for those who didn't take the course, there are in the letters that we send out at the very bottom, there is a website for the 2022 course and also for this year's session. So please go back and refresh your appreciation of that. But having said that, I know that it's not something that you can just read and fully appreciate. But again, I think the best way to respond to that is that for Shinran, it is still just a symbol. And symbol, and if you look at people like Joseph Campbell, who wrote on symbolism, in our modern times, and what he says is basically symbols are ways of expressing deep truths that cannot be expressed in words and concepts. And so I think we can, appreciate the descriptions that made sense to especially people back then, but it also makes sense to a lot of people today that it kind of inspires us. But it's not exactly, the Pure Land is not exactly the way it is. But as Joe said, what the Pure Land does is that it symbolizes the fact that we will ultimately attain our ultimate goal as Buddhists of becoming Buddhas, and that we will be freed from suffering. And then in that capacity as Buddhists, we come back to help others. And so anyway, this is a huge topic and is a perennial topic. And so we have to come back again. But please go back to those references that I mentioned, and then continue to take the course. We'll be addressing this. Okay, Igor, any more?
Well, yes, one more from Robert Garvey. What a question. Does Shin Buddhism seem well suited for the modern time of religious pluralism?
Joe?
Well, that's probably above my pay grade as well, but I will tell you that it fits my modern world very well. And it brought me great relief on the day my mother passed. I did not want to, she knew I was Buddhist. We had talked about that. I did not want to proselytize. I did not want to infringe upon her beliefs, but I read White Ashes that day. And for a person living in the 21st century, I like to think of myself as a very modern person in terms of technology and all of that. Nothing could have suited me better than reading White Ashes that day.
Okay, well, thank you, Joe. In terms of pluralism and coexisting with members of other religions, Buddhism probably does a very good job because essentially the basic Buddhist position is that it's not the only way for everybody. It's the best way for me, but I don't impose my way onto others. And that, I think, is refreshing. As far as Shinran, I believe he is a Buddhist because he acknowledges the right of others to determine for themselves. And in chapter 2 of the Tanisho, his disciples come all the way from Tokyo area to see him in Kyoto and asks them, did you teach religion? Did you have teachings that you have not shared with us? We hear that you are giving secret teachings. And to that, he responded, no, I've told you everything. I've shared everything honestly. And this is the way I feel. However, if you cannot, if you don't accept what I say, go to Nara and there are great scholar monks there, or to Mount Hiei and there are scholar monks there. Go check them out for yourself. And finally, what he said, which I've always liked, is he says, "Memmen no on hakarai nari." That is in Japanese. It means that finally, ultimately, it is up to you. It is up to you to decide. And so there is that openness and flexibility that you see, and which is in keeping with the pluralistic world in which we acknowledge that all religions are that I as a Buddhist, as a Shin Buddhist, can live with others of different religions, because we don't see it as the only way. It's the best way for me. Okay, so I hope that answers, Robert, your question. And I believe, okay.
There is a comment from Robert in the chat. He says, I think it was Reverend Patti Nakai who said Shin Buddhism is for anyone, but it's not for everyone.
It's not for anyone, but not
it's for anyone, but it's not for everyone.
Well, okay. Yeah, that sounds good. Kind of catchy phrase. I think ultimately, religion, or especially Buddhism, is a first-person endeavor. So I'm not really too concerned about how others think about, I being a Buddhist or others being whatever. But how about for yourself? Where do you stand? And then how do you think about other people's religion? And I've told this story before, where in a Buddhist Christian dialogue session, we had a session on whether we can be saved. And my Christian colleague, who is very liberal, says, and I asked her, can I be saved? And she said, well, you're a nice guy, but doctrinally, no, because I had not accepted Jesus. Okay. So that is from a doctrinal standpoint, some religions take that position. But I'm sure that she probably on a personal level felt that I'll be, fine. But had she asked the same question to me, I would never said no, you would not be saved. There's no way for me to make that kind of a statement. I don't. So anyway, that's my position on this. If you're interested in my particular position on interreligious relationship, if you take a look at the Jewels book at the end in the appendix, I have a kind of a very short discussion about that. I am basically a pluralist of a particular kind, that we acknowledge the differences, but there are commonalities. So anyway, this is okay. So any more?
Yeah, speaking of Christian, there is a question from Dexter. In America, Christian heaven concepts predominate our society. How do you relate Shin Pure Land to non-Buddhist Americans?
Joe?
Beyond my pay grade.
Should we keep it for Kuwahara Sensei?
Yeah, let's just keep that for later. Yeah. Okay, so the time is now for Reverend Kuwahara to join us from Berkeley Buddhist Temple. And as you can see behind him, there is the altar of the Berkeley Buddhist Temple. It's probably the most simplest altar in all of the Buddhist Church of America, any Shin temple outside of Japan or anywhere probably. But I've always liked it for its simplicity, and we also appreciate Reverend Kuwahara for joining us. So Sensei, please, can you spend the first 5 minutes talking about yourself, introducing yourself to the group?
はい、ありがとうございます。Thank you, Sensei. Can you hear me?
Yes, very
Okay.
good, loud and clear.
Okay, good, very good. Yeah, thank you very much for, thank you, Sensei, for mentioning the, actually, this is the virtual background. I'm at the George Fisher Center
Virtual.
office. Yeah, I feel guilty. ごめんなさい, I'm cheating you. But, I think it's nice to, so this is a chance to talk about, we enjoy the conversation about the Dharma, Jodo Shinshu teaching. So that's why I wanted to, have Amida Buddha with us, although this is a kind of virtual background. ごめんなさい. But anyway,
but Sensei, we're talking about Amida and Pure Land being a symbol. So, virtual is like symbolic. And so it's anything that we have is virtual, actually. Think about it. Okay, thanks. Okay.
So as Tanaka Sensei mentioned, I think the BBT Berkeley Buddhist Temple, the Onaijin altar would be they are very, simple. So really good, easy for resident minister to clean up. We don't have to, do, very decorated, shrines for Shinran Shonin and the Renya Shonin. But at the same time, I feel kind of a little bit, guilty, onaijin without the Shinran Shonin, Renya Shonin, and then also like Seven Masters and then, Prince Shotoku. But I know this is a kind of design of the Berkeley Buddhist Temple. When, they dedicated this Hondo, maybe they had a kind of limit of, cap of the budget. So that's why maybe they didn't, have enough fund to, put those, small shrines for Shinran Shonin and the Renya Shonin. But anyway, so maybe just briefly introduce myself. My name is Kiyonobu Kuwahara. I'm now serving the Berkeley Buddhist Temple and then also the Buddhist Temple of Marin in California. And also, which is more like my weekend service, weekend, thing. And then Monday through Friday, I basically work for the Jodo Shinshu International Office, which is like a nonprofit organization founded in 2019, kind of working with BCA, Hawaii, Canada, and then South America, and then European Sanghas in Europe, Australia, Mexico, to try to, we become a bridge to connect all those Jodo Shinshu Sanghas members so that, Amida Buddha's teaching, Shina Shonin's teaching, Amida Buddha's wisdom, compassion, will spread to the world. So that's kind of my weekday job. And then I am originally from Hiroshima, Japan, and I came to Berkeley 2003. So yeah, I spent over 20 years in the United States, which I hadn't expected when I came here as a student of the Institute of Buddhist Studies. And first, I came to a student of the Institute of Buddhist Studies. And then when I was about to graduate, then Jodo Shinshu Center, actually Igor is in the Onaijin Hondo hall of the Jodo Shinshu Center now. But Honganji wanted to start a new office in Berkeley at the Jodo Shinshu Center. So I was kind of recruited or invited, Kuwahara-kun, would you like to, work for the, this place? And then I talked to my parents, and then my parents kindly, generously said, okay, go ahead. So then I'm still here. And then I really had a good, time with Nanjo Sensei, who is also on the screen today. So I have 3 boys, all are made in USA, and they have grown up now. So the oldest son, he is a college student now. He was born in Berkeley. Now he's age 18, goes to college. Second son, he is a freshman high school. He goes to Berkeley High. And then the youngest one, he's the 7th grade, first year of middle school. And then yeah, so that's, I enjoy my life in the United States.
Okay. By the way, Sensei, were your boys, your kids, which hospital were they born?
Alta Bates on Ashby.
Okay. Well, we have something in common because all 3 of our children were born in Alta Bates. So,
Babies.
okay, I see. So, Alta Bates babies. And great. So you mentioned for the people here, I think it's important that they know about the Jodo Shinshu International Office, JSIO, right? And
Yes.
they put out for your information, maybe you can't see it, and these journals, and then Sensei has it, and then there's that book there, the little book that is written by all the people who were not raised Jodo Shinshu but became Jodo Shinshu. And can they get copies of? Can they sign up to receive those journals? And
Yes, hi.
okay,
Or maybe they can join the we have let me I can maybe during the Q&A I can put the website address.
well, we can send it later, so that's
I-
okay. Just, no hurry, so we can send it. And I think that the little book written by all the convert Jodo Shinshu Buddhists is very inspiring. And maybe when you have volume 2, some of the members here will be able to contribute. Okay, so the first question is what do you think of the fairy tale-like description of the Pure Land that we find in the Pure Land Sutras? Can you say a bit more about that?
Hi, thank you, Sensei. ありがとうございます. I know this is a kind of chat, more conversation format.
Yes,
But kind of
yes.
due to my karma or my habit, and also English is my first language. So I want to.
You
Sensei,
mean
may I
second
use
language?
Yeah, second language. Yeah,
Okay.
maybe first language in my previous life, but this life, this is not my first language. So, Sensei, is it okay to use a PowerPoint? Something show on the screen? Is that okay?
Okay, sure. Yeah.
そうですね。で、let me slide show ね。はい。Yeah, so before I start my talk, my responses to Tanaka Sensei's question, I want to kind of, this is kind of my introduction, my speech. So whenever I talk about my Jodo Shinshu Buddhism, so this is my kind of ground or foundation. So what is Buddhism? Who is a Buddhist? I think the bottom line is this teaching is for us, for each of you to become a Buddha. Of course, we have to think about what does it mean to become a Buddha. But this teaching is the for us to become a Buddha. And then, so to me, this is a framework or context. So whenever we think about primal vow, Pure Land, other power, Nembutsu, Shinjin, Amida Buddha, any topics, I'm sure you've already covered those topics. But whenever you talk about, especially deep discussion, I think we need a context or framework.
Mm.
In other words, if we try to figure out or define, explain those things without this kind of framework, context, it's really hard. So for example, what is mother? So mother can be, interpreted, explained biologically or legally or emotionally from different perspective. Depending on where you are from, which perspective, we receive different interpretations or explanations. So in other words, whenever I talk about, Jodo Shinshu, Amida Buddha, Primal Vow, today it's a Pure Land. So I'm going to, my all idea responses comes from, based upon the idea, Pure Land is for me, for each of you to become a Buddha. That is a kind of, framework when I talk about this. And then, based on that ground or foundation, I'm going to talk about to the first question, because I received a question from Tanaka Sensei beforehand, so I could, prepare. So my answer is, it is Buddha's skillful means to awaken me how bad my ignorance is or how troublesome my knowledge is. What do I mean? So those things, right? Thomas, Thomas the Tank Engine, or maybe Thomas Jerry. People could say, trains don't talk, or cat and mouse, they don't run with two legs, right? So when we watch those cartoons, we don't say that kind of thing. But that's how kids, they learn lessons, something very important from those cartoons, right? So in the same way, how about the symbols or narratives in the Pure Land Sutras? Maybe some people try to approach, read, interpret from a scientific or more rational approaches. But there are other kind of way, which is maybe religious approach or more existential approaches. And then again, so Pure Land Buddhism, Pure Land Sutras, they are Buddha's teaching. Why Buddha delivered this teaching? Because Buddha wants us, each of us, to attain Buddhahood, become enlightened, be liberated from this samsara. So that's why this is the kind of Buddha's word guidance for our attainment of enlightenment, Buddhahood. So in other words, from the Jo-san's chat with Tanaka Sensei talking about the symbolism and the narratives. To my understanding, those symbols and the narratives in the Buddhist scriptures, it's kind of rough gemstone. So if we are ignorant of the value of this stone, just look at from the outside, it's just a rock. It's kind of nothing. People just throw away, right? Don't pay attention. But people who know what it is can go deep inside and then, get something valuable. And then I talked about we are ignorant of the value. So let me talk about this, Gotchy. So we talked about the three poisons. Tanaka Sensei talked about the three poisons. The last thing is Gotchy in Chinese, moha. And then, so those are the Chinese characters. And then interestingly, the second Chinese character, chi, is a, kanji is a combination of different parts. And then this second Chinese character, chi, is a combination of the yamaidare, the, よいしょ。あ、ごめんなさい。よいしょ。Just a moment, please. So this part is sick, ill, or unhealthy. And then this Chinese part is a knowledge. So Gucci is a ill or unhealthy, knowledge. And then this is what we carry in our everyday life. This is how we take action, based upon this ill, unhealthy knowledge. So that's why with this Gucci, wrong knowledge, we try to challenge, understand Buddha's words of wisdom, symbolism, and the narratives. So again, so this is a kind of rough gemstone. So it has a deeper meaning, and it's Buddha's voice. So we need to go beyond, deep into those symbols and the narratives so that we can discover the gems or something valuable. So in Japanese, we say like kikihiraku. There is a word kikihiraku. It's not just a listen. And then there is another meaning, open or disclose. So we go deep into all those words, phrase. And then like opening that like a gift box, we have to find what's in it in all those symbols and the narratives. But in other words, Pure Land Buddhism requires us that kind of process. In that sense, it's a kind of troublesome, or maybe challenging, or maybe difficult teaching, because we can get easily stuck with the superficial, meaning of all those expressions, symbolism, or narratives. Right? So that's why we have to carefully dive into the deeper and deeper of those words. So in other words, I would say, what is it that caused, Pure Land Buddhism such challenging, difficult teaching? Maybe our, something here, or maybe our ignorance. So in that sense, yeah, this fairy-like description is a kind of skillful means Buddha tried to awaken me, who I am, or what do I carry in, living in our everyday life. Hi, so this is kind of my response to the first.
Okay, well, thank you. I can see your point that on the surface, Pure Land Buddhism, especially the talk about the Pure Land and Amida, can be very challenging for contemporary people. But I think thank you for your warning us again, reminding us of the difficulty of appreciating it without, deepening our understanding or questioning your commitment to try to understand. And so okay, can we go to the second question about some other Buddhist schools talk of this world as the Pure Land? What do you think about that?
はい、ありがとうございます。Yeah, so this is another kind of interesting, very important question ね。田中先生、ありがとうございます。So, to that question, my answer is I personally don't take this view, this interpretation. Of course, speaking of Buddhism, there are many different schools, and then Pure Land Buddhism is one school, one tradition under the big umbrella of Buddhism. And then even within Pure Land Buddhism, there are many different schools. There are many different eminent monks, masters, and then like Jodoshu, Jodo Shinshu. If you go to China, there are many different schools. So in other words, there are many different ways to understand who or what Amida Buddha is, or what is Pure Land, what is Nembutsu. But I personally don't take this view. This is mainly because as I get older, in the last session, you're talking about the age. I'm 49, so much younger than from your age. I understand that. But based on my 49-year experiences in this world, I become more convinced, the Buddhist cosmology, Buddhist view of like a Saha world or samsara. And then I think it's it is true that this is Saha world. And then we are totally away from, Pure Land or land of purity. So this is more like a discussion or explanation by Jo-san in the previous session. So Amida Buddha's Pure Land, it's a land of purity. And then what kind of purity, pure or impurity talking about in the framework of Pure Land Buddhism? It is kind of land free from impurity. And then this impurity is like a 3 poisons or deluded passions, or in Japanese, bonno. So they are the causes of our, suffering, stress, difficulties, challenges, all those kind of mendokusai trouble things. But once we attain birth in the Pure Land, we are completely free from all those, causes of suffering. So that's why in the Pure Land, we are totally free from suffering, stress, difficulties. As stated, like a first vow of Bodhisattva Dharmakara's 48 vows. So this is my interpretation, understanding of what the Amida Buddha's Pure Land is. And then now take a look at the reality of this world or our everyday life. As Tanaka Sensei kind of pointed out, there are so many wars, fights, crimes all over every day. Yeah. And then one way to look at this world is more epistemological way. Okay, so actually there is no suffering, depending on how we perceive those troubles, difficulties. Depending on your mindset, you can totally kind of ignore, you can totally, don't feel any suffering. So this, it's up to your, mindset. This is a kind of one way to kind of try to, basic idea of this world is pure and something like that. But of course, there are innumerable tons of people who suffer, agonize, and then shed tears every day, every moment on this earth, right? Especially I'm a Jodo Shinshu Buddhist priest. I, try to be, sit next to those people who are shedding tears. For me, it's really difficult to say, oh, it's up to your, mindset. There is no suffering. I cannot say so. So for me, it's more real to see this world as a Saha world. So that's why, because of that, I don't, see this world as a Pure Land. And then also, another thing is a Saha world. And this is in Japanese, we translate Nindo. So this first Chinese character means endure or endurance. So the land of endurance. So this is another Buddhist, view of, how to see this world, how to observe this world. Okay, so this is a Saha world. Because, as you know, there are, people around us, they caused so many troubles and issues, and I need to endure them. I think this is how most of us interpret this word, Saha world. But there is another way to look at this view. It's easy to talking about, other people's fault. Because of them, I suffer. Because, of them, they make troubles. But how about you? When we point at somebody, one finger is pointing someone, but the 3 fingers is pointing myself, right? And then, so this, how about, this Saha world, looking at myself? I'm also the one who give a trouble cause to other people, right? And then other people around myself, around me, they endure causes, troubles, difficulties that caused, by this guy. Right? So this is a kind of interesting story by one Jodo Shinshu, Buddhist. Now, I like his talk. Yeah. So again, so if we look at this, take this interpretation, we just easily complain, criticize other people. putting myself aside, right? But if we take, look at the Nindo this way, maybe we try to become more, humble, or maybe try to be more responsible, or we could appreciate other people's endurance, right? So maybe this is kind of another way to, take the meaning of the Saha word, right? Shakyamuni Buddhism is not providing us a tool to criticize, complain other people. But this is a teaching to change, practically, actually change my way of life. So if we take this Nindo this way, I'm sure we can change. We can change, maybe this word. I mean, so although I don't take this word is apparent, but which it doesn't mean I'm giving up improving this word, right? So by following, practicing Buddhism, I'm sure Buddhism changes us. And then when more people receive the transformation, changes brought by the Dharma, and then more people gather, form the society, community, and then I'm sure we can reduce the conflict, fight in the society. I believe that's how Buddhism can make a contribution to the achievement, society, or harmony in this world. Anyway, so this is kind of my, ごめんなさいね, I talked too long. So this is my kind of response to the question number 2.
Well said, and I think your point is very important. Okay, so given that we don't have much time, can you respond to like 3 and 4? The third is, how does the assurance of our birth in the Pure Land affect us in this life? And the fourth one, what does it mean to return from the Pure Land? And we only have a few minutes, so if you can kind of rush it a little bit, but main point.
So this is my response to number 3, and then sometimes as a minister having a hard time to explain this Jodo Shinshu very special teaching. Okay, so 24 hours a day, and then everybody equals, this is equal to all people. And then within this 24 hours a day, we have a lot of things to do, right? And then at the same time, living in this life, in this Saha world, we have so many things to think about, like a finance, health condition, me, my aging parents, retirement, and kids' education, right? Not something practical. Internally, emotionally, we have to, think about so many things. But I think most people, this is the biggest and the most troublesome issues. How to deal with my death or death of our loved ones. So to me, Amida Buddha's this teaching or Jodo Shinshu's this teaching, maybe not removing completely, but maybe, reduce the size, negative, influence of the kind of fear or anxiety of death. And then that's how we can, focus on our everyday life more, or give us some more comfort or relief. That's kind of my take of this question number 3. And then number 4, what does it mean to return from the Pure Land? And then let me rephrase this question. Then why, returning from the Pure Land? Maybe this is kind of related. This question is related to Dexter's question about the Christian heaven and then Jodo Shinshu Pure Land. So again, at the beginning, I use this framework context, right? Everything Jodo Shinshu Buddhism or Pure Land Buddhism is grounded on this idea. For me, for you, become a Buddha, enlightened one, right? So of course, this returning from the Pure Land has a strong kind of based upon this idea, right? So that's why returning for what? To liberate me or those in suffering from samsara. So that's why, they will come back from the Pure Land. And then how? Joe-san also talked about not something physically. So to me, this is a kind of, those are the examples of how they return to us. So this is Shinran Shonin's Shoshinge book. I use for my morning service. So every morning or every time I chant Shoshinge, I'm listening to the voice of Shinran Shonin, who passed away 800 years ago. I'm listening his voice 21st century in the US. And then when at the Berkeley Buddhist Temple, we recite Amida Sutra first Sunday. Whenever I chant Amida Sutra, I listen to the voice of Shakyamuni Buddha, who passed away 2,500 years ago in India. What does it mean? So they are returning to me, not the physical sense, but the words or maybe wisdom, right? So that's how they return to me. And then this is my bachan, the grandmother who passed away 2008. I was a obachanko, grandma boy. So yeah, it's really tough for me, that when she passed away. But whenever, I remember she's a very Nembutsu person. She recited Nembutsu, many, many times a day, and she was very soft, although she had a really tough life. But whenever I remember her, I kind of, sense, receive the light of Amida Buddha or guidance of Dharma. So maybe depending on how mindful we are living a life surrounded by Buddhas and Bodhisattvas from the Pure Land or from the realm of Nirvana, right? To my understanding, Nirvana or truth itself has a power or kind of dynamism to emerge or manifest itself to guide us. So Tanaka Sensei talked about the symbol, the definition of the symbol, right? So the truth or maybe Nirvana has a dynamically or dynamism to manifest itself to embrace, guide us. So, and then, but they need something concrete, right? So that's why we need a language. Maybe we need memories. And then that's how we receive the guidance from the realm of Nirvana. So this is Amida Buddha's aspiration, not, bringing us to the, attaining birth in the Pure Land. Amida Buddha, Jodo Shinshu emphasizes the returning aspect because Amida Buddha, so this is Amida Buddha's aspiration. So this is one of Shinran Shonin's hymns. And those who reach the Pure Land of tranquility return to this samsaric world of 5 defilements, where like the Buddha Shakyamuni, they benefit sentient beings without limit. So once we attain complete this world, this life, and then attain birth in the Pure Land, I would say we join the team Amida. We join the team Amida. And then we start a new kind of duty or kind of project to coming back and then try to, guide or embrace those still suffering in this world. So that is the meaning of returning and then try to, awakening or guiding to the attainment of Buddhahood. And then the last question is, what does it mean for you to be born in the pure? So for me, born pure, one way is a revelation from samsara, revelation from this saha world, which is an endless continuation of suffering, stress, challenges. And then at the same time, we are not just going somewhere. So joining Team Amida, what is Amida Buddha's aspiration? To save, to embrace, liberate all beings from the life of suffering, right? So that's why we join Team Amida and then returning this world and then provide the guidance or benefit, people still suffering. But talking about this idea, so this is a picture of my oldest son who goes to college now. So this is his elementary school graduation. Okay, so there is a day one, he enrolled at elementary school. And then 6 years later, he graduated school. So after elementary school, they go to middle school, right? But the graduation, I'm sure, this is the end of school. They have to say goodbye to teachers and other friends, right? It's kind of sad. But this graduation is a kind of also the start of a new school life as a middle school. And then can we, adopt, take this idea? Maybe we, start this life in this samsara saha world. And then someday we need to end, there is an end of this life. And then what happened after that? According to Pure Land Buddhist tradition, then we attain birth in the Pure Land. But it's not just going somewhere. It's kind of start a new life as a Buddha. And then let me extend this idea of going to the Pure Land. Because when we say go to the Pure Land, then kind of confusion with a Christian heaven. Going to heaven, going to Pure Land. Let me kind of draw a line to distinguish these two ideas. So say I went to those schools, Hiroshima University, IBS, Ryukuk University, UC Berkeley, Stanford, Columbia, and Harvard. And then I'm sure most of you, no way. There are so many schools. Sensei, you cannot go that many schools. Right? And then what does it mean when we say I went to those schools? Am I talking about just visit those schools, or I actually enrolled, studied those schools? Right? So those three schools, the schools that I actually attended and then graduated, right? I went to Hiroshima University, I went to IBS, I went to Ryukuk University. But what does it mean? Am I just talking about physically visiting, being there? But more the reality is I went to Hiroshima University and then I studied. And then I majored in education to become a school teacher. So I received the advanced education at the Hiroshima University. That's the actual meaning of the phrase, I went to Hiroshima University, IBS Ryukuk too. And what happened? Studying there, those schools, I received the advanced benefit. And then after graduation, what did I do? I started to, benefiting the community. Now, IBS Ryukuk, I received education of Buddhist studies and Jodo Shinshu studies. Now I'm a Buddhist priest, based on the studies, knowledge that I received from those schools. I try to provide the guidance of Jodo Shinshu Buddhism to the community. And then how about when we say go to Pure Land? Am I just talking about physically going to somewhere, or something practical? What does it mean to go to the Pure Land? We have to think about this, go to the Pure Land. So Pure Land Buddhism, we are living a life in samsara. And then go to the Pure Land means we kind of liberated from this endless circulation of samsara, right? And then attaining wisdom, which is a source of guidance. And then returning this samsara to provide the guidance. So again, this is kind of idea of going to the Pure Land. Maybe I think we could kind of a little bit differentiate the idea of Christian heaven and then Jodo Shinshu Pure Land, birth in the Pure Land. はい、ごめんなさい。I know.
Okay.
Took
Thank-
too long.
All right. Thank you, Reverend Kuwahara, for very provocative and thought-provoking presentation. I like the word join Team Amida. I'm going to use that from Team Amida. I feel like, in Shinjin, we join Team Amida here and now. And when you do, your mind plays in the Pure Land. My mind is in the Pure Land. I'm not in the Pure Land now, but my mind plays in the Pure Land. That's the term that Shinran uses, phrase, which I think is realistic. This world is not the Pure Land as we, given all the difficulties that Sensei mentioned. It's hard to see this world as Pure Land. But my mind is like in the Pure Land. My mind plays in the Pure Land. And then I'm joined the Team Amida here and now. And when I'm liberated from my body after this life ends, I become fully a member of the Team Pure Land. So Sensei's talk gave me another way of talking about, phrasing my thoughts in that way. So, okay, so Sensei, you did go over, but we'll forgive you because it was very good. and you give me some insights myself. So, Igor, any thoughts, any questions that we have for Reverend Kuwahara?
Yes, there are questions. There's a question from Reverend Anita. Saha world is universal. Are you suggesting Pure Land is not possible in this life unless the Saha world changes? If this is the view, then it is not an individual experience. Did I miss your point? Anita, would you like to clarify this question?
That was the best I could do.
Okay.
Thank you, Anita. Arigato. Yeah. So my response to this question is, so again, so sometimes Pure Land Buddhism or Pure Land Buddhists are regarded as sort of escapism. Okay, so giving up this, tough life and then just, expect a nice, better life after we, ending this life. Sometimes people understand the Pure Land Buddhism like that kind of, escape or escapism. But I don't think so, because this is a sort of a kind of, but this is not a session for the Shinjin. But I'm sure Shinjin, Shinran Shonin says, it's kind of Buddha's mind. So once we receive the Buddha's mind, I don't think we become that, like a negative or nihilistic, attitudes. Although we cannot achieve Pure Land in this life, but okay, let's do our best. Let's try our best. I think that's a kind of motivation of Shinjin kind of dynamism too. So in that sense, although we cannot completely remove all those, impurities from this world, but each of us can do whatever, we can do. And then that's kind of effort by each individual, I'm sure will bring betterment or improvement of this world. I think, yeah, that is kind of my response to that question.
Okay, thank you. All right. Yeah,
There's
go ahead.
there's another question from Dexter, which is pretty close to the previous one. Do people create our Saha world from a natural, perfect world that could be a Pure Land if we stopped messing it up?
Yeah. So Shinran Shonin, in the time of Shinran Shonin, there was this kind of idea. So, so we can establish the, Pure Land within our heart kind of thing, And then, so, but Shinran Shonin, he didn't, in the Kyogyo Shinsho, he clearly stated, rather he kind of showed a negative reaction, that view. And then, so, yeah, but it's true, depending on how we look at this world, we can, in a sense, we can make this world Pure Land, or we can make this world Saha world. So, of course, our view, how to perceive, see this world is very, very important. Yeah. But at the same time, there are so many bombs all around us. So, it's really difficult to, completely make this world, Pure Land.
Yeah. Thank you. The other day, I read about in the New York Times how the Ukrainian people, some of the people are going around fetching the dead the Russian soldiers. And if you think about it, a lot of these soldiers from Russia, they come from, outlying rural areas, ethnic minorities were kind of forced to join the Russian army. And they're talking about 100,000 dead Russian soldiers, and of course many on the Ukrainian side. But when you think about the reality of that kind of thing taking place here and now, and look at about over 30,000, people in Gaza who have died since October the 7th. And so, can we really talk about pure, this world being a pure land? And I think there are some improvements, social improvements. For example, we are much more open to, people who are different from us. I think more equality, but at the same time, there are many setbacks in those terms. And to think that this world will become perfect, it's at least for me, hard to believe. But we do the best, as Sensei said, we do the best we can to make this like into a pure land. But so that's why I like the Shinran's, the phrase, my mind placed in a pure land. And I try to effort to, and if you look at life as we studied last year and as we talked about this year, that we do the best we can to make it more like a pure land. And that's important. That optimism of, trying to continue to improve despite all the negativities. And I think with Shinjin and the spirituality that, and having joined Team Amida, we have greater optimism. Okay, next, Igor. Any more?
Don't have any.
Oh, okay.
Good.
And it seems like we have reached the end of the session. This
Okay.
concludes the March Fireside Chat. We hope you found it informative and meaningful. The link for this video will be sent to you in the next few days. We feel strongly that reviewing the video will enhance your learning as well as your ability to respond to the questionnaire. Again, please try to respond within the next 2 weeks, as the comments will be posted anonymously for the rest of us to gain greater insight into the many perspectives possible. Now, we're going to have a chat room showing coming up next in a few minutes, where you will have the opportunity to ask questions or make comments with Reverend Kuwahara, Reverend Tanaka, and Joe Gotchy about Buddhism and Shin Buddhism. So, as usual, our chat room in Nirvana Hour is strictly optional. So please don't feel obligated to join, but it would be great to see you. For those joining, we're going to have a short 5-minute break. For everyone else, we look forward to seeing you for the next series on our path of deeper understanding of Buddhism in the fall of 2024. Emails will be sent out for pre-registration this summer. Until then, please stay safe and well, and we'll see you in the chat room in about 5 minutes. And Reverend Tanaka, did you want to add any last-minute goodbyes?
I do. I wanted to reiterate our appreciation for all of you to have joined us. We had 200 people sign up, and but 100 were admitted to this class. And today we had 50 joining us. And that's not a bad percentage, that after, 7 or 8 times, we still have 50 people showing up. And wanted to thank Joe and Reverend Kuwahara for their sharing of their appreciation of appreciation of Buddhism. So again, we hope that you can join us in the next class, and please tell others. And most importantly, do what you can to share your, inspiration, your appreciation to others, in your own way. I think that we can help to make this world more like a pure land. Okay, thank you.
Okay, see everybody in 5 minutes.
Yeah.
Thank you. ありがとうございました。